Welcome to a special Halloween episode of Phantom Fandom, where I will be reviewing Clipping's album, There Existed an Addiction to Blood. Clipping is an experimental hip-hop trio from LA, the lead rapper, Daveed Diggs, being most notable for his portrayal as Thomas Jefferson in the original cast of Hamilton. But unlike Hamilton, this music is incredibly experimental, incredibly challenging, and explores a lot of different themes. A lot of different themes that other hip-hop may portray, but in a completely different light. Now, this album, released just in time for Halloween, is a concept album that explores different violences in America, framed through motifs of horror movies, particularly ones from the 70s or 80s, in terms of the sound and style. The music is composed to reflect that, at times drawing resemblances to horror movie soundtracks produced by John Carpenter. And the album seems to mostly focus on violence related to gang activity, but it also includes notions of police brutality and other nondescript series of violences. Before I talk about the album, I want to say that my general interpretation of this whole thing is that in a time where most Americans have become numb to the violence in our country, whether it be because of mass shootings, gang violence, among others, I think Clipping is attempting to reframe all this violence in such a gruesome, horror-type way that it's going to finally get us shocked again. This album is full of unique and challenging sounds, themes, and song structures, but it still provides a certain level of accessibility through Daveed's rapping and some pretty relatively accessible trap drums throughout the album. But that being said, there's also quite a bit of drumless beats that build entirely based upon some swelling synths and others, as well as some beats that play with meter, like Story 7. I think this album is a good middle ground between their self-titled album and their previous album. Their self-titled album was relatively accessible, and their most previous album was super conceptual, pretty challenging. I think this album is conceptual and challenging enough, but it's still really accessible for someone to get into it, someone who couldn't get into something like Splendor and Misery, or something as aggressive and off-putting as Death Grips, for example. I think a strong point of not just this album, but all of their albums is Daveed's rapping. It's incredibly meticulous and articulate, even when he's rapping at the speed of light, which he does flawlessly. He's always had this absurd amount of different flows that he can switch between at the blink of an eye, even when meter is changing. The same rings true with this album, even managing to rap flawlessly on drumless beats, and beats that change the meter like Story 7. He has quite a few interludes that portray different invocations of older horror movies, a few with vocal samples that portray things like haunting of a woman's house, akin to something like Poltergeist, and an exorcism. I think these are really cute and thematic. The one about the woman's house in particular is a bit off-putting because the way that she's saying everything about what's going on in her house, she's saying it so weirdly that I can't tell if she's just a bad actor and she's just reading her lines directly, or she's just been completely messed up mentally by whatever's going on in her house. That being said, I think all the other interludes don't really do as much to portray this dark thematicism as that one interlude and the rest of the songs. So going through these songs here, the intro is a heavily compressed drumless intro, just a straight verse of him rapping. That's how most Clipping albums start. There seems to be the sounds of shovels going on in the background, presumably burying one of the many bodies that are created over the course of this album. One lyric that stood out to me was, "On top of dead bodies in the olden days when the pen was a quill and the blood was the ink upon which all them scary stories were built." I think seeming to imply that all the different violence of traditional scary stories are most likely rooted in real-life violence, and stating that the violence in America has always been present in our humanity. The song Nothing Is Safe is such an interesting song. It's built upon a single piano note that's really invoking a John Carpenter-produced 70s horror movie soundtrack. As the track goes on, different synths and drums come in, go back out again to build energy over time to a huge swell, before dropping back to the low piano and a bit of drum at the end. And the lyrics portray a violent raid on a gang trap house. Bodies sleeping in shifts, other bodies keep watch. It kind of establishes the gang members as bodies rather than people, implying that gang activity kind of creates an environment where you are dead on arrival to inevitable violence. He Dead is a really great song. It's a really chilling song. I love the drumless beat that mostly consists of a swelling synth, also reminiscent of horror soundtracks, and some really dark percussive noises. Ed Balloon's vocals are haunting and really help create this terrifying mood. And the lyrics, I think, are mostly about an ex-gangster who has to deal with the PTSD of gang life. So what them books got you but dreams of everything lost? What does sleep bring but screams at night when you toss? But also, Ed Balloon's lyrics seem to talk about the current state of police brutality in America. Particularly towards black individuals, which is, I think, pretty on the nose in terms of where black individuality and identity kind of stands in this tumultuous current society we have. But Mala Ordina is a bit of a disappointing song for me because David starts rapping and weaving in some gruesome imagery over a rather accessible but still scary sounding hip-hop beat. The bags on the table ain't for weight, they for body parts. Victim skin stretched across the wall, call it body art. Beat and mood are great, but I wish the features went with the absurdly gory imagery like David did. The whole point is to, display gang violence as something really absurdly gory and violent as it truly is. But then the two features, while their verses are fine, really don't display this goriness that I wish they had gone with. As soon as I heard this dark but somewhat traditional hip-hop beat, I knew that Benny the Butcher was going to sound amazing. It was disappointing how tame his verse was. Club Down is another great song that portrays the darkness of gang violence. How it builds is so awesome. It gets progressively darker and noisier. And at the beginning there are these abrasive hits of noise that come in kind of sparsely and begin to make me feel a bit uncomfortable on the first listen. And as the song moves forward, it becomes apparent that they're heavily distorted screams, and it becomes incredibly uncomfortable to listen to near the end, which is a great feat. And there's some great lyrics on here. In the hopes of getting a golden noose for the neck, golden goose from a fairy tale, shitting Fabergé eggs. Here snitches shit bricks, then quick to talk pig Latin. Talking about gangsters' monetary motivations, as well as showing how easy it is to be put in positions where they'll talk to the police. That gangsta shit, the whole world loving that gangsta shit. Can't change the shit, it's dangerous, but it really ain't nothing to a gangsta. I love how this chorus is sung tongue-in-cheekly, despite the darkness of the instrumental. It's a nice contrast and parallel to the lyrics, talking about how gang violence is a gruesome thing, but we glorify it through hip-hop, which is getting to a huge, now multiracial audience who's gotten used to it as a motif, rather than a representation of reality. Run for Your Life is probably the most creative song on the album. David is rapping next to a low-traffic road. The instrumental only really comes in during the chorus and during the guest vocalist verse. But as cars drive by, you can hear different beats come in at the beats per minute and at the intensity of David's rapping, and then it goes off again, panning with the direction of the car. And I think that's an incredibly creative decision. The lyrics portray someone running from a woman portrayed as a monster or a murderer. This woman seems to be portrayed by LeChat in verse 3. Though I'm not really sure what the main idea of the track is. Is it meant to portray a specific woman? Or is this meant to be a statement on femininity in general, which I'm not sure what that would quite be, but still nonetheless super creative. The show is a noisy and calculated instrumental, with lyrics that seem to be how real-life violence is portrayed as a show for the sake of entertainment. And this is specifically framed to the idea of a red room, which is a rumor that on the deep web, there are people who will live stream the torture and murder of individuals with people donating money to decide what he does to the person, which is a really unsettling proposition. I love the running synth that comes in during verse 2, and I love some of the really gruesome lyrics here, like see how the bone exposed, nice blood bouquet, trace of marrow, clearly portraying this violence as beautiful. Let's start the show, come out, sit your ass down, don't blink, don't make a sound, just look. It's okay to cry, you live your best life when you watch them die. As individuals, we know that violence and gruesome details should invoke a horrible feeling inside of us, and it kind of does, but at the same time, we can never look away. There are other lyrics on here that kind of imply that the killer does violent acts for the sake of attention. We continue to give it to him as we consume it, portrayed by different media. Now, Blood of the Fang is arguably the densest song in terms of biting political commentary aimed at current and historical American institutional racism. The beat is awesome, and it interweaves this addiction to blood sample and in a really, really cool way and an addicting way to listen to. And the lyrics finally directly reference the name of the album. These lyrics come from a song that was in a 1973 vampire horror film, Ganja and Hess, which is clearly referencing America's addiction to violence, this hunger for blood. The song seems way more directly about the ridiculousness of the devaluation of Black American lives currently, making references to various influential Black icons like Huey Newton, Malcolm X. There's also different references to the racism we had in the past, for what they figured was only 3/5 human, and they thought they could enslave by disconnecting from the truth. And I think parts of this are expressing that David's opinion is that black-on-black crime is self-destructive and unprogressive when we're already dealing with this terrible white-on-black racism and white-on-black crime. And every book, record, or CD even made the MP3s laced with blood. Another instance of how music these days is displaying different levels of violence, either intentional or unintentional. Story 7 is another iteration of the story series in Clipping's music. I won't spoil the main story, but it's a violent story involving characters from Clipping's previous story tracks, notably 1 and 4, as well as some new ones that have been introduced. And regardless of the lyrics, the structure itself is incredibly interesting. He effortlessly changes up his flow and his rhyme pattern to match the complex time signature in such a smooth way that you can barely even tell, and it's insanely impressive as always. And the album ends with a performance of avant-garde musician Ania Lockwood's piece, Piano Birding, wherein she does indeed burn a piano, as he does here. To be honest, it's a lot more interesting than I expected an 18-minute piano burning recording to be, as it kind of did have a bit of an arc. You never knew when a piano string was going to break because of the flames. Near the end, a huge piece falls near the end after a lot of build-up and kind of fizzles it out at the end. And thematically, I can see why it's on the album as well, as you can interpret it as another symbol of the consumption of beautiful violence. That being said, I don't really feel the need to listen to it after the first time. So yeah, I love this album. I love how uncomfortable quite a few of the tracks make me. I love how violence is portrayed in such a gruesome, absurd manner. I love the dark, horror movie-esque production that helps support the lyrics. And I love David's consistently amazing rapping, the way he switches up his flow, the way he rhymes over things that most people could not rhyme over. Again, I was a bit disappointed with a few of the features. There are a few songs on here that either don't do a lot for me or I still just don't get the inclusion of, such as All in Your Head, or Attunement. While I don't think Attunement is a bad song, and I do get a few lyrics here and there, what they're going for, I don't know what the whole drive of that second to last track is. If you like challenging music, or if you want to like challenging music and you don't know where to start, I think this is a really good place. Just remember that if you feel uncomfortable, that's part of the point. Clipping have done it again. This is definitely one of my top 5 albums of the year and probably will be by the end. So yeah, thanks for joining me in a very spooky episode of Phantom Fandom, and I'll see you all next time, unless I don't.